So I'm Janna Morishima. I am the founder of Kids Comics Unite. But my or our online community of kids comics creators is not the OG in this space, I guess. That would be Tom from Sequential Artist Workshop.
Yeah, we've been around. We started in 2011. I had been teaching at the School of Visual Arts in New York City prior to that for about 10 years, and sort of burned out on New York City, burned out mostly on New York City, but also burned out on that type of teaching. And I don't know, wanted to start my own school. So that's what I did. So it was analog or in person for a long time, and it still has an in-person component, but we started moving online in 2017, and then really fully, obviously, with the pandemic in 2020.
Cool. All right. So those of you who are new to Kids Comics Unite, we are an online community for comics creators who are focusing on work for kids and teens. And Tom's Sequential Artist Workshop is an online community and education provider for comics creators who are creating comics mostly for adults, but I know there are definitely people who take courses through Sequential Artist Workshop who are also doing books and comics for also for kids and teens. Um, and so Tom and I met each other, what, like 4 years ago or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know. In fact, Tom, I don't remember what was the moment when we met. I don't remember how we met.
Well, I think we met both because we were both had online communities on Mighty Networks, and we just kept kind of saying hello, and then we started meeting monthly, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
so Tom and I are in a mastermind together, you guys. All of you are in your critique groups. We are in our mastermind. We are planning dominion over comics somehow. Who knows? But Tom is way too nice to plan dominion over anything, I think, right? I
Oh,
mean, to me,
goodness.
Tom, you are the embodiment of doing creative work for the sake of your soul, I guess.
Oh gosh, that's so nice.
And also for pure joy.
Yeah. Thanks. I mean, I guess that means if you want to come to me for career advice, I'm not the right person, right?
No, I think you give career advice too.
Oh, that's nice. Um, yeah, anyway, I mean, it's actually what you're saying is actually true. I lived in New York for so long and taught students who did want careers in the arts and things like that. And obviously that's a lot of what we did. But but moving out of New York, it took me out of the commercial realm a little bit, and it allowed me to figure out what making art for joy it looks like. I mean, it's a part of what we teach. Um, but also I really try and help people focus in on what it is they want to be doing, what it is that makes them feel good to do. If that coincides with what could be on the shelves or what could be next to their favorite graphic novels or something, then that's great. But um, like I say on our podcast, what we try and do is not make people feel bad. Like we want you to make comics and not feel bad, and it can be kind of tricky sometimes.
You did a whole podcast episode about what is it called? I created a pitch and now I feel horrible or something
I
like
think it was my book got accepted and now I feel terrible or something like that.
that. So maybe we could start off this conversation talking a little bit about feelings, because the reason I asked you, Tom, to come and talk to Kids Comics Unite is because you are launching one of your signature programs, which is the graphic novel intensive, which is
Right.
basically all about how to tackle a really big project, maybe when it's your first time or you're feeling really intimidated by it. So maybe you could start, Tom, by telling us a little bit about, I'm gonna guess that there's a fair amount of mindset that is part of what you're doing in the graphic novel intensive. So could you say a little bit about that?
Sure, and I could share my screen a little bit too if that was if that.
Yeah, that, oh, hold on, let it,
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, now you should be able to.
Okay, give me a second. I'll share my screen and but only for a moment to show you what Janna's talking about. Um, yeah, it is the SAW 6-month graphic novel development program. Starts June 1st, and it's our 5th year doing it or something like that. And look at that. That's a testimonial, right? It even saved my life. We do get a lot of people for whom it's it really helps them get a hold of what it is they've been wanting to do, what it is they've been feeling about it, helps them evaluate their expectations and sort of get their expectations in line with what they're capable of, and yeah, and hopefully help them not feel bad all the time. And when we get inside of it, it looks like this. And I'm actually looking a little bit for sorry. There is a big section about feelings, but maybe I can just stop sharing and talk about it. The truth is yeah, a lot of it is when we set our minds on a big project, there's so many expectations, and we want to do it right, and we try so hard to do it right. And it's hard to do. It's hard, but because a lot of times what we're doing is like we've got this one mind that's giving instructions to the other part of ourselves, right? The part of ourselves that's just dreaming up the idea and thinking about it a lot is different than the part that's got to do all the work. And sometimes they're not as in sync as you think. Um, and so we can either sort of get them in sync and sort or get them in sync rather, um, and just realize that there's going to be a lot of ups and downs with that, a lot of ups and downs. Or we can try and get you in sync with something that's more pleasurable and maybe smaller scale, or is maybe more in keeping with your abilities. And sometimes your ability is just how much time you have, but a lot of times it also is like, do I draw like my favorite artist, or I draw like Jillian Tamaki, for instance, or do I draw? And a lot of times we don't. Um, so yeah, we really try and help people work through what can I do? You know, what can I do that's going to make me feel good, that's going to look and feel finished at the end, or and make me feel satisfied and happy. Um, that's a lot of what we do. Yeah. And again, sometimes, but it's like, 5%. Sometimes it's like, can I make a very polished pitch and get it sold? I mean, you can, but that's not what this course is about. But we will help. And actually, on one of the screens I just showed, Cheyenne Smith was one of them who did last time around, and she actually bounced into KCU for one of your uh what is it, the competition, and then she
Mhm.
bounced back out. She was like, I learned so much at Janna's thing, and then we helped her finish up and get her package ready, and she got an agent and all that. But that's one success, you know, one type of success, I should say. Another type of success is like and we get this a lot. It's like I now understand my idea better, and I understand what it is I can do with it, and how to sort of like um get into the chair and do it and find accountability and find a community. Or I met a bunch of people that are helping, and we're all helping each other and things like that. Sorry, I'm really rambling, but feelings are kind of a
Can you
rambling
give
thing.
can you give some specific examples of how you make the process pleasurable or fun or less stressful?
Well, a big part of that is the community. When they don't feel like they're up against the world, it's like me against the world. Um, that changes so much. And even if we're all struggling with the same thing, if we're all struggling with the same issues of self-esteem, or maybe or just not having enough time, abilities, things like that, we can lift each other up. And usually that system works pretty well, where like most people are doing okay, and somebody who is feeling low, and then that person is like, and we're all and we the community help and sort of
Mhm.
help you go forward. A lot of times we're strangers when we start, and we can see in our mind who you want to be better than you can, and you want to be the person that's producing work, and that is um and that's glowing as a result of it. And we don't know all those, like all the negativity that's in your head that's like, and everything that's dragging you down. We don't see that for a long while. If it's like consistently dragging you down, after a while, we were like, oh man, I don't know how to help them. But early on, we really see who you want to be, that because you've showed us. And so we're there to, it's really easy. We create a really good network of people that want to be there for you.
All right. I know that there's probably people here who might have questions for you, Tom, but I also know that you said you had a little exercise you wanted to
Oh,
do with
well,
people. And I
yeah.
also have more questions for you. So I'm wondering what would you like to do, Tom? Do you want me to keep asking you a couple questions, or do you want to do your exercise or answer some questions?
I'll tell you what, I'll show a tiny bit more about the course, and then we'll do one of the first things in the course, and it's the simplest thing, but it also sort of like it starts us on the right journey, I think. And then we can ask more questions, and then you can ask more questions, and then we can take some
Yeah.
questions from the group. That sounds good. Okay, I'll share my screen again. Everyone, I have a bunch of windows open, so it might take me a moment, but we'll see if I get it right. Um, I think so. Um, okay, I am going to talk about. So these are our, like, we have sort of six, seven, if you count the epilogue, six sections. And they're right here on the screen. Honing in on your idea, that's section one. Parameters and formats, that's when we decide what kind of format do we want it to be in? What are the tools I'm going to use to make it? Um, who's it for, but also what's it look like? Things like that. Section three is about story and structure. That's when we sort of like start to structure it so that 6 months from now or 5 months from now, we're not left to be like, what's the next part? What am I saying? It's like, oh right, I sort of structured it, and I used some good guidelines to sort of create an outline. That's when that we do that in section three. Section four, which is called Keep Going or Keeping Going, that's the biggest part of the course. That's like months long. And that's that sort of time that we're talking about where we're holding each other up. We're at this point, we've created some systems that work well for us that allow us to create however many number of pages we can a week, or yeah, a week's a good timeline. Um, and that's like, and that's where the pitfalls come too, just the emotional ones where we're like, at some point, um, at some point we one of our mentors, Hyena, says it's good to have a crisis plan for this part. She says, like, for when you're feeling low and you're like, why did I get into this? What am I doing? What is this project? I can't do it. For when that happens, we know who to call. We have our support system already. That's section four. Section five is like when we get towards the end, and we need to sort of create a structure to sort of finalize it. It's like, how do I get there? Like the last push is a big one. What is my plan, especially if it's going to take me beyond the 6 months? What's my plan to get beyond the 6 months? But if I can finish it in the 6 months, what's my plan to sort of wrap it up? And that takes a little bit of time. And the sixth section is really exciting, and it's publishing and sharing. And it could mean talking about agents and publishers. It could mean submitting um, to other anthology places. We put together an anthology of a sample of everybody's work, and I can show one of those in a moment. Um, but it can also mean self-publishing. It can mean, what does it take to self-publish? What kind of tools do I need to self-publish? And where can I take it? Where can I show it? A lot of sharing at that point happens because the people are really fond of each other at that point. And then we reflect a little bit at the end. So one thing we do, I'm going to scroll forward to homing in on your idea. And I think it's not this section. It's the next section. I'm going to go here. Our first exercise, which we don't even really do until June 1st, but we'll do it here, is these three things, actually, you'll see the first two right now. Can we boil our idea down to one sentence? And I'd love to see people in the chat, if you have an idea that you've been working on, um, even just in your own head, can you boil that down to one sentence? And if you can, put it in the chat, and that'll be great. And then, so I'm actually going to stop sharing. I'm going to copy that. I'm also going to put what I what I put down in my own for my book. So I'm going to put it, oh, wait. Sorry, stop sharing. Okay. In the chat, I'm going to ask you if you have an idea, if you're working on a project, what is that idea? Can you put it into one sentence? And there are other terms for this, like some people call it elevator pitches and things like that. I don't really like to do that. I'm more interested in what the story is in whatever words you have for one sentence. And I'm going to, as an example, I did a memoir. It was a memoir about a tragedy, but I'll put what I wrote down here in the chat there. And if nobody's got an idea, if nobody's working on a big graphic novel, that's okay. We'll talk about something else. But Janna, I'm sure as an agent, you talk to people about like, simplify it down, communicate it down so that an editor can know, so that, a customer can know what is this book about, right? So you guys probably talk about that a bunch. Uh,
Yeah.
so some people might be doing it personally, some people might not be putting it in the chat, but that's the first thing we do. And then the next thing we do, hopefully you've already been able to do that, maybe in your notebook. If you want to put it in the chat, that would be great. I'm gonna mention, oh cool, we have one.
Oh,
Remember,
yay. Michael, good for you.
how hard she tries. That's great. Um, that's great. I'm gonna ask the next thing. I'm pulling it from our Daisy's transported into a world of living plants and talking bugs to find out that even though her family is growing, there's still room for her. Oh, that's really lovely. Great. Um, after after we do that, that helps us focus on when sort of new ideas come, like, are they part of this story or not? Do they attach themselves to this sentence or not? And that can be really useful. The next step we always do is we ask people to boil down to one word. Promise you, this is a good idea. So with Michael's, I'm not sure. Michael probably knows this project better than I do, but sometimes that word for my memoir that I mentioned up above, I've done it a couple times. Well, I originally, I'll write it down in the chat. Um, I originally wrote that the word was acceptance, but when I finished it, I realized that it was a little bit more like integrate, like and that actually helped me in making my big project because I had a lot of ideas. I didn't have it was a memoir, so I had a lot of stories, or I had a lot of things that could be part of the project or part of the book. And keeping that idea of just, is this about the acceptance of it all, and it or not? And if it was, I kept it in, and even still I had to edit things out. But if it wasn't, I definitely knew it wouldn't be in there. And so I've got a stack of notebooks of things that were cut from the book because they weren't part of that same theme. And that's one way to keep going. Oh, cool. We have more pitches. Preservation, great. That's a great word that you can really focus on as you're making your story. Famous nature detective Growl Lumbo is smarter than all of them. Clever and lucky. Solves mysteries faster than the time at space. Real life nature mysteries. Solves the case of the vanishing petals, the missing rattlers, and the glittering garden in a funny style. That's awesome. That sounds like 3 books, but in a good way, in the way that, a series like, Encyclopedia Brown or any number of other projects would be. 8-year-old Jeff gets bitten by a muskrat and uses his imagination to conquer fear of death and pain of rabies shots. Oh, that's intense. That's great. And I wonder what that single word would be. Survival, Jeff writes. Huh. Fear of death and pain of rabies shots. Yeah. Belonging. Yeah, all of these are really good single words. Inclusion for sure. 2 Black women born 200 years. That sounds great. Demetria's sounds great. Compassion, courage, persistence is my word. Great, fun. So I don't know if people want to do a drawing exercise. I think we should save it for the end if people want to do, but I'll tell you what that drawing exercise is. And that is boiling down the story to 4 panels. And I know it sounds crazy, but we do it, and that's sort of like, and it sort of balloons out that one single word a little bit, and it gives us a framework that's super tiny, but it really helps us focus. And I can show you an example later, but keep working on those single word one or single sentence ones and single word ones, and we can come back to it. and then Jana and I can talk more about graphic novels and things. Did you want to continue the questions, Jana?
Okay, let me look at my questions
Okay.
here. Okay. So this is a question, Tom, that I'm very excited to ask you, which is, and I did email it to you. I said, one of the things that I love about you, Tom, is your can-do spirit, but also your super positive, gentle, encouraging energy. And I wanted to ask you, have you always been like this, Tom? Or is it something that you grew into? Or yeah, I'm very curious about that.
I don't know if that I don't know if that's going to help anyone. Clearly, you want an answer, but I don't know if it's relevant to everyone else. But
No, I do
um,
think it's relevant, Tom, because I think that we change a lot as we grow, and I feel like I'm such a different person than I was,
mm,
20 years ago. And I feel like it is helpful, I think, I don't know. I'm curious.
well, oh, sure. Well, I mean, get an artist talking about themselves, and they'll talk forever. So please cut me off. Um, but I have always been this way, and um, I recognized it early on. Like even in art school, when you're like 17, and people are like, what do you want to do with your life? Like I want to I want to make everything, I want to do everything, blah blah. And I was like, literally, this is true at 17. I was like, I just want my needs and my wants to match up. And so I'm not friends with the kid that weird that who asked me that question because we just went in different directions. And even just a few years later, so now I'm in my early 20s and I'm in a group of cartoonists, and we all love each other and we're really supporting each other. Um, and I remember I said to my best friend at the time, he said, what do you want or something like that? And I said, I just want to be part of the stream of creation, or something kind of almost silly sounding like that. But that's what I wanted. I wanted to create and feel like the aliveness that you can feel when you create something. And you need to be seen, you need to have your work accepted, but you don't have to make a big commercial deal out of it to feel so much satisfaction and joy in creating something. So I did go into, I think, I did make a lot of decisions, or I went in a lot of directions that I was unhappy about eventually. Like I did move to New York. I did try and build a bigger career. I did try and publish a lot of books. I did watch the sales go down and down and down. you know. Um, and then when I stopped trying so hard and yeah, there are just times when it's felt better. And so what I've grown into actually is using that spirited nature for good and trying to help other people, to be honest. Like, so um I want people to not feel lousy when they make things. And I've already said that. The one thing that was uh for some reason I've always been very persistent and I've always made things. And even when um and I wasn't gifted with artist parents who really supported me, but also it took me a long time to realize I was also lucky because they didn't really stop me either. They were kind of like, well, whatever, we've got this weirdo kid or whatever. But they weren't actively trying to stop me. And I didn't realize what a gift that was, right? Like, because I did have lots of friends who did have like weird creative intellectual parents or whatever, and I didn't have that. So I felt myself as sort of getting the short end of the straw, or the short straw, but in the end I realized I didn't. I was allowed to keep doing things. Um, and for whatever reason, I just kept doing things. Um, and finding joy in it. And so I try and realize that like that's a responsibility, and I can help people feel good. There's one thing that happened, and it's funny because all in my life I always chose art over money. And I always felt ashamed of it, like deeply ashamed for a very long time. It's like I don't have really money to go out to dinner with you, and I don't have money um for all the things that normal some sort of normal middle class life allowing people. And then eventually, I only maybe 5 or 6 years ago, people started asking me, so how do you choose art over money? And I'm like, it's really easy. I've been doing it all my life and suffering as a result. But now people are asking me and offering me a little money to do it. Um, but, but a lot of it does, a lot of the answer to that is really is like you need people who support you and want you to do things and want you to make things and who believe that your creative spirit is just as important as any other creative spirit. And it takes a lot, it takes a little bit of an army, to be honest, which I could talk about more. Anyway,
Oh,
does
yeah,
that answer that question?
it does. It does. So, Tom, it's actually really serendipitous that you are launching the graphic novel intensive during this month because our theme in Kids Comics Unite this month is all about daily practice and habits.
Uh-huh.
So I feel like they really go together. And everybody here, I'm sure you are have some questions, so I'm gonna turn the mic over to people here who have questions in just a moment. But I'm curious, Tom, within the graphic novel intensive, are there um, ways that you help people find their own daily practice or build the habits that allow them to sustain a really ambitious long-term project?
Sure. I mean, it's really easy and you've heard it all before,
Hey,
but
it's easy.
it is easy. It's it's small wins and it's accountability, you know? Don't, I mean, just be satisfied every time you draw a panel, just a panel, and have somebody waiting for that panel, you know, and have somebody saying, who you've agreed to, like, um, hey, tomorrow's Wednesday, I'm gonna have a panel done. Those panels will add up. You might be able to do 2 panels, you might find in those 2 days before Wednesday or whatever. Um, Being really satisfied with small wins matters a lot. I've done so much soul searching the last couple of years. Janna knows a little bit about this, I think, but I stopped making comics a little over a year ago, just cold turkey, and I wasn't even sure why. I was like, well, I'll tell you exactly what happened. I'd been making, I've made comics all my life, almost never not making them. I've gone through fallow periods where it's like a lot of sketchbooks and nothing gets finished, but still a lot of working. But and then I made 5 24-page comics in a row, and I really liked them. They're really fun, and I was in this rhythm with it. Slow, but I was happy with it. And I needed some accountability even to get those last couple done too. I, I always find some friend, often it can be a long lost friend who have like haven't been in touch with in a while, and I'll be like, you want to just like check in on each other once a week and make sure we've done what we said we would do. And for me, it was a page a week, or maybe it was 2, but maximum 2. Um, but anyway, so that accountability helped me get to that point. But after 5 issues, I started having big ideas and I wrote them all down in a frenzy. And I had the next 7 issues planned out. And I bought myself a binder and I was like, this issue will be this and this will be great. And I was so excited by the ideas. But the person that finds joy in drawing the stories was like, you're gonna be miserable. Like I just couldn't, I couldn't force myself to draw these ideas that I had in some big inspiration burst or something. And I was like, and I just stopped. And I didn't know I was stopping. Instead, I just randomly wrote and recorded a song, which is something I have never once done in my life ever. But I do have a piano and some other things. Um, and I have been kind of curious about music and sort of studying piano a tiny bit. And so I wrote a song, and then that was so exciting, um, that I said, sometimes I get kind of excited that I said, I also had like school was out and there was some other things that made it easy to do. Um, I said, I'm going to do that every day for 2 weeks. And I did. That's the crazy thing. They, I can't even listen to those songs now. They aren't that good. They're not good. But I finished them and I uploaded them to SoundCloud, which is free and easy to do. And, and then after like 14 tracks, I think, yeah, I said, okay, well, now I can get back into comics. And then like a week went by and I said, I think I want to make another song. And then I made another song, and then I made another one, and then I made another like 15 songs, not all in one day. Now it took 2 or 3 days. Anyway, I went through that cycle. By about the fourth album of songs, I realized like I'm just like not drawing anymore. And but I was having so much fun. And by the fifth album, I made 5 albums in a year. By the fifth album, I realized like I was coming up on this year to the day of the last day I drew, which was March 17th, 2023. And I was coming up and I said, okay, I'm going to finish this fifth album on March 17th. And and then really do some soul searching and see if I want to keep drawing and what the story is. And I did. I like the last album was uploaded that day, hitting those deadlines. Did I mention deadlines? I forgot to mention deadlines. Small wins, accountability, and deadlines. Oh my God, the deadlines. Anyway, so so then I was like, that was so much fun. That was so much, and I learned so much about creativity, and I learned so much about how creativity works for me. And then the big question was like, how can I bring that back into comics? Because again, I've been doing it for so long. And and I'm still wrestling with it, but okay, so here's what happened. Sorry, I keep going. Um in April, so it was just 2 weeks later, in April in our community, we said, hey everybody, let's celebrate the spring flowers and let's everybody draw a plant a day, one plant a day. And a lot of times we do challenges like that at SAW in the network, but I don't always participate because I'm usually busy with other things. But this time I participated, but I brought out the iPad that I have tried to use like several times over many years and have never been able to. And then I said, okay, I'm in this time. And I drew a flower a day on the iPad, which I never could get comfortable with for about 25 or 6 days. And around the 27th day, I noticed I wasn't keeping up with the flower challenge. I was like, what's wrong with me? But I realized what I was doing is sketching on the iPad a lot instead as a comic artist again. And I was like, oh, this is fun. Wow, suddenly I'm enjoying drawing this. But but I also learned that I learned the value of deadlines. I learned the value of letting myself be surprised emotionally by what is happening, either in the sketchbook or in the music or whatever. And I learned that there's a real joy in sort of wrapping something up, and then building on it later. That's me. That's how I'm learning that I like to work. So I'm in the middle of this whole soul searching where I'm trying to finish up another issue of something. I have no idea what it is, and it's going to be weird. But I've got a big time accountability partner. Her name's Jess Rollifson. We do a podcast together. And I've told her, oh my God, it's Friday. I told her that on March 31st, I was going to present her with an issue no matter what level it was at. I was going to present her with a finished thing. And so she's expecting it on Friday. Oh my God. And I got to figure it out. But having that accountability partner really helps. And so, but I also know here's the great thing. I know that if I finish it and don't think about it for like a week or something, when I look at it, I'll see things in it that I didn't see before. And I'll be like, now I know a step forward. And all I need is one step forward. The problem a year and a half ago was I outlined 50 steps forward and it was overwhelming and I didn't want to do it. So what was that question? Was there a question there? Did I just ramble
There
on?
was a question,
Oh,
but
what was it? I
I
forgot.
don't remember what it was, but I've
Oh,
been listening.
it was how do you create um how do you continue
Daily
creating your
practice. Yeah.
creative practice?
Mhm.
Yeah. Deadlines, accountability, someone on the other end waiting, and small wins. Those three things for sure.
Okay, I would like to turn it over to the group here. Does anybody have a question for Tom? He is here to talk to you about how to create a full-length graphic novel or about mindset or I don't know, not feeling lousy.
I'm gonna put the link to the course for people who are interested in the chat. But yeah, I'll answer any questions. I'll talk more. Janna had a question which she didn't get to, but I'll mention it because it's a good one. Um, uh, Here's a question, or you can tell me if you're saving this, Janna. Here's a question I love to ask people. She said, could you tell
Oh,
me
yeah.
about a failure in your creative career that resulted in an important step forward? Um, so I have more aside from aside from quitting comics. But I don't know if you want to go into that a little bit more, but there are lots. Um, I'll mention two real fast if that helps. And but definitely I want to answer questions if there are any. But an early failure was just not studying enough. So I remember it's a minor one. But I remember I handed a book in. I think I was almost 30 at that point. I was a very slow, late bloomer and a slow learner. So like the things that people understand about story and about drawing early, I didn't really get till I was much later. But I handed this book in, and then I started reading all these books about story structure, and I was like, oh, now I see. And it was just like weeks later. It wasn't like one of these things like you look at something from years ago. It was more like, oh, shoot, that book I just handed in, I should have done something different. But I knew exactly what it was and I learned it in a book. So things like that happen. But um, there's also a big failure. I tried for years to get into comic strips because uh, I loved comic strips growing up. I learned on Peanuts and Charlie Brown and things. And but all I did was sort of longer form things. And then at some point just I realized like, oh, I remember comic strips. I really liked them as a kid. I wonder how you write them and how you draw them. And so I actually reached out to a friend and we collaborated for about 9 months on something. And then that got me understanding how to make comic strips. And I did it uh for about 2 years on my own. I was in two newspapers. Like usually you get into like if I either you do it on the web, which I did, um, and you try and get into this, and you try and break into these syndicates they call them. And the funny thing is I tried and I tried and I tried to break into the syndicates. And the really funny thing is one of my best friends was the editor in chief of one of them. It was called King Features in New York, and his name is Brendan. He was a great friend of mine. But I'd always be like, Brendan, why don't you pick up my strip? It's a good strip. And he was like, I know it's a great strip. I love it so much, but um, it's just not saleable because it's just a little too intense for today's newspapers. This was 2006. Um, and I was like, okay, fine. And then so I was in two newspapers and for about a year and a half or something. And then eventually those ran out. Janna knows that publishing is so fickle and it really depends on like who your editor is and how long they stay in their position. And so like I weathered a bunch of editorial changes. I kept being surprised. I was like, oh no, a new editor, they're going to fire me. And they didn't. And then I was like, oh no, a new editor, they're going to fire me. They didn't. And eventually there was a new editor and they did fire me. And they put in Garfield and Sudoku instead and kicked me out. But that gave me another sort of period of reflection, another time, and like part of me was like, thank God I don't have to do comic strips anymore. And that lasted about 2 days, and I was like, oh, I really want to do comic strips again. So this is a very strange story. It sounds strange, but it wasn't strange at the time. So I contacted my friend Margot Dubai, who is half Palestinian. She's Arabic. And I said, Margot, what the world needs now, this was 2007 now. What the world needs now is a friendly Arab American comic strip. And we should collaborate on it and we'll do it from your family's perspective and we'll mine some of the stories you've told me and we'll write it and draw it together. What do you say? And she said, you're crazy. But 2 days later, I asked her again and she's like, all right, let's try it. So we wrote and drew like 2 weeks of strips. So that's 10 to 12 strips, maybe 2 Sundays. And we sort of sketched out another 2 weeks or something. I brought it to my same friend, Brendan. And I said, Brendan, what do you think of this? And he said, bring me 4 more weeks and we'll sign contracts. I was like, what? It was that easy? Like, it was just the wrong property, right? At the wrong, or the other thing I was pitching was the wrong property at the wrong time. Well, long story short, this was the wrong property at the wrong time too. So we've worked together. And so what happens in that particular system is you work with the editor for 6 to 9 months on developing a real backlog of strips, like to launch with. So you have 9 months of strips ready to go. And then the sales team, and they're still they still drive around from newspaper to newspaper and knock on the office doors. So this was 2008. Um, so the newspaper team would, or the sales team would knock on the doors and try and sell it. And so we launched that strip called Ali's House, which you can find on the web somewhere. Uh, so let me say that then the market crashed in October 2008. Then they tried to launch our strip. And so all those salespeople are knocking on office doors or newspaper doors, and they're saying, "We've got this new strip, Ali's House. What do you think?" And to every newspaper was like, "Are you crazy? We're like, you know, hemorrhaging money here. Can we pay less for Blondie and Hagar the Horrible that we're paying for right now? Like, we just don't have it anymore." And so like it was just a big sort of bloodbath financially for newspapers, and then it didn't officially launch. It sort of sat where it was. It didn't get into enough papers, and then that was the end. So the lesson I learned from that was like, I gotta stop trying to sell things. I mean, that was like, it was really a lot of fun, and that those daily deadlines taught me so much. I did daily deadlines for 2.5 years, and taught me so much, and it was also so exciting. The great thing about working on a comic strip is like you don't have time to overthink your ideas. You don't have time um, to talk yourself out of something. You have an idea, and then you've got to draw it so that you're ready for an idea tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And that taught me a lot about that daily creative practice you're talking about. And again, a small, 4-panel comic is a small win. Um, Daily deadline, accountability. I had editors waiting for it, but also one friend is enough, as I've said. Like my friend Jess is waiting for me on Friday to have this comic. Um, I want to answer Carolyn's question, then any way you want to go, Janna, is fine. Any
Yeah.
any tips for someone with a comic strip background, short form, doing a graphic novel? Yeah. Um, Graphic novels are easier. Seriously. Um, uh, you don't have to like be as tidy with a graphic novel. And if you have done short form things and you do have that daily practice, then you probably have what it takes to get into a larger rhythm. For me, the thing that was lacking when I was doing comic strips is like I felt like there were certain ideas I couldn't go into deeply enough, and that was the most disappointing thing. And so allow yourself allow yourself that, like, take those ideas a little bit farther. Um, and if you're struggling, then just work in small sections. Maybe from 4 panels in comic strips, just build up to a page and then see if that page rhythm works for you. And then from there, build up to 4 pages or 6 pages. And um, you don't have to build up from 4 panels to 200 pages. You can build those up into building blocks, and they can they can feel complete as if they have a sort of rhythm to them, or it can be invisible. By that I mean, like, there's a book called Jar of Fools by a friend of mine, Jason Lutz, and he was publishing 1 page per week in the newspaper. The newspaper was The Stranger in Seattle, and so every page had to feel sort of complete. It had like a tiny beginning, middle, and end, and 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 so in a sense it was a comic strip, and that allowed him to create this graphic novel. Oops. Jar of Fools was this really wonderful graphic novel that had this kind of comic strip rhythm where every page sort of had a little bit of a finality to it, and it worked really well. And that allowed him the 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 sort of courage and understanding of his own creative practice to make this mammoth, insane book called Berlin, which he said was going to take him 2.5 years, and I think it took him 22. It we'll have to look it up, but it definitely, I'm pretty close. Um, uh,
All right, so we have Gino has a question in the chat, and then Leo has his hand up. Gino, do you want to unmute yourself? Can you do that and ask your question?
I see it in the chat otherwise, but we'll
All
certainly
right.
wait if he likes. Gino, have you ever stocked in some scenes because of dialogue issues? Quote, sometimes I see the scenes in my head like a film, but when I have to summarize, it's become harder to preserve the dialogue interactions when you have a limited number of paper. Yeah, well, okay, so I think what you're saying is if you have a limited page count, um, you have a limited page count, but you want to go over that page count because the natural rhythm of the dialogue wants to go longer. If that's what you're saying, that's tricky. And editing is just, editing is something you have to learn, but it doesn't exist outside of parameters, right? So like um, if you had unlimited amount of paper, you wouldn't have to edit that. But also who knows who would read it, right? Because it's like if it's 700 pages and it's just the same dialogue over and over again, maybe nobody read it. I don't know. But maybe uh it's for an anthology, and that anthology has to be 6 pages. And as such, you've got to trim down the entire monologue from Hamlet down to 2 pages so that you can fit the rest in and something like that. And that's just like it's kind of you just kind of have to be brutal and you cut things out. But the real issue is who's giving you that limited number of pages, and do you have to accept that limitation? And if you do, then you just gotta you just that's why we do that lesson of that 4 panel comic. We sort of trim out everything, like anything that's fun. We trim out in that 4 panel comic, and the only things left are those essential things. And then from there we can build up and add those little bits of dialogue that we really love and stuff like that. So I hope that's helping. I think um I think Gino says yes in the chat, so I hope that helped, but I'm happy to answer more. Cool. All right, thanks. Yeah. Should we go
All
to
right, Leo?
Hi, Janna. Thanks. Yeah, Tom, thanks for this. I was very excited when I saw that Janna posted this. I was thinking of going to see a therapist, but I thought, if Tom's talking about this very subject that I need help with, I think you're probably the best person to speak to, at least most accessible this week. Huge fan of your work. I met you at Mocha Fest once. I've read Rosalie Lightning and your graphic memoir book. So I love what you do. Big fan.
Thank you.
So my question for the most part is about burnout. Now I'll tell you some of the specifics. So I've got a graphic novel in the works with Macmillan Children's Publishing. Jen is my agent. She did an amazing job selling my book. But be careful what you wish for, because now I'm in the thick of it, and I'm really struggling with things like time versus quality, and also keeping that idea, keeping your work fresh,
Mhm.
and how to stay engaged over a long period of time. I think one of the problems, and I heard it so many times before, try building up, go from small to bigger. And I went from small to like ginormous, and the growing pains are true and real, and the struggle's real. And also, the thing that I'm struggling with too is coming at this really like an illustrator. I worked like on a single image, or a very small form, and I could do all the parts of the process and then stand back and see something finished. And I've been working on this one graphic novel now for at least 2 years, and I'm it's like months and months of thumbnails and months of pencils, and I'm in the inking phase now, and it just feels like it's never ending. So how do I keep from burning out? That's all.
I imagine keeping your eye on the final deadline helps. You have an editor who's like easygoing, or an editor who's got the hammer ready on your
My editor has been very easygoing, which
Mhm.
is why the graphic novel is 350 pages.
Oh
You know,
my.
it just it I was able to put it all in there. It is better because of my editor. Um, and Yeah, she's taking kind of hands off. Well, I shouldn't say hands off. She's very hands on through the story editing, but now that we're drawing, she's, you know, my deadline was spring of 24, and that's come and gone. And
That's fast.
yeah, I've got still a lot of work to do.
Just one more question. Just how much more time do you think you have on it?
You know, I'd like to say that fall of this year. I'd
Oh,
really just love to have it done. You
uh-huh.
know,
Oh, that's not so
that's the
bad.
other thing. You know, I don't want to feel that way about my work either. You know, I
Right.
don't feel like, oh my God, I just want this over with. I want to enjoy the process. I'm trying to stay engaged. But it feels like it's never ending.
Yeah, you need a support team so that at the end of the day, every day, they can be like, Leo, how'd you do? And you can be like, oh, I did it or I didn't do it. And then be like, that's all right, we got you. Let's go play basketball or whatever. And then or let's spend, or maybe you're like really under the gun and you're like, I need a break. Somebody watch something with me on Zoom for 20 minutes, and you just like hang out and sort of be in each other's space and you're like, all right, thanks. I needed that. And then go back to the table. Maybe you keep them on Zoom, that the accountability buddy sort of system works pretty well. I mean, the real issue is that when you sign a contract, you usually can't back out of it, right? So like, I'm like, oh, just do comics for joy, right? You want to feel good. But when you sign a contract, you're making a commitment and you're going to have to find ways to make that commitment that involve words that you've heard, which is, self-care and sort of not burning out. I assume you read all the comics broke me hashtags that happened last year on Twitter and other places. But if you haven't, you should
No,
go.
I'm going to look that up.
Yeah, because it's good for camaraderie and you can be like, oh, I'm not alone. And not being alone is a big help. I think I've got one of our teachers is he's just a great teacher and he comes up with phrases like um pain shared is pain eased, so just like just knowing that you can share that pain with someone else really helps. Burning out happens when you're like under the gun and you're like, you probably, if you only have till fall, you're in great shape, but you're probably going to feel lousy and you're going to hate that project for like a good month and a half. And when you hand it in, you're going to be like, get this off of my desk. Like that's normal. That's going to happen. So you just got to find like different kinds of like ways to burn off steam in that last bunch of hurdles, ways to just like, maybe take up boxing or something. Take up something physical, which can help you burn that energy off that's getting all curled up inside you or something. I don't know if that's helping.
Yeah, that's good, Tom. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm like, I mean, you could also move out of the country.
And I don't want to not finish it. So,
Okay. Okay.
I mean, there are some silver linings. Like I'm learning to be less particular.
Yeah.
And I'm letting a lot of things go that I might have noodled before. Like, oh, I gotta get that, anatomy just right. And somehow in the process of learning to let things go, because I'm drawing so goddamn much, that the drawings are actually coming faster. I'm able to like get the anatomy and the perspective and all this stuff. But I'm also, there's this filter that's kind of loosening its grit and saying, you can't just noodle this drawing forever and ever, right?
Yeah.
I give it a certain amount of time and then okay, I'm done. And it actually doesn't feel like I'm losing quality. It's just like a letting go in some way. And I think it's better in the end. So
That's
there
awesome.
are some good things coming out of this crazy project.
Yeah, you'll reflect on it really happily. And hopefully you're probably dreaming about your next project, but hopefully you're dreaming about them with more realistic ideas. Or maybe the next project is like, I'm going to make everything really easy and loose and not,
Yes, totally.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Doing a 24-hour comic, if you guys all haven't done one, that's a great way to learn how to do that. But all right, it sounds like you're good to go, but good luck and feel free to reach out. It sounds like actually, I think the chat got really busy with all that. So there's a lot to read there. Should we go
So
see?
since we're almost, or we just hit 8 o'clock, I want to make sure that everybody here knows, you were gonna announce a discount, right, Tom? If
Yeah.
anybody's interested in signing up.
Yeah. It is, and I'm writing it here. You can enter that at checkout.
Okay, so
And if for some reason that doesn't work, tell me. Just say it's not working. I get emails like that all the time. And
so everybody here, Tom is being super generous to Kids Comics Unite, and if you're interested in signing up for the 6-month graphic novel intensive, you use that code KCU15, you get 15% off the price for the graphic novel intensive. And make sure you use the link because that has, well, actually, Tom just put the link in the chat. And I think you said you'll let Kids Comics and Kids Comics Unite have this discount for 24 hours, right, Tom?
I can do that. 24
All
hours.
right. So you guys, if you're interested, you have until 7 or 8 p.m. tomorrow night, I guess, to make up your mind. Is that
And
right?
yeah, that link in the chat will take you directly to because I stuck the KCU, you can see it at the end. I stuck the KCU 15 at the end. So the 15% will actually show up on the screen and you won't have to enter it in at checkout. So that'll work.
Cesar, did you have a question?
I saw him.
Yeah, was it Cesar?
I just wanted to contribute to what Leo was saying, because I just came out of I just finished my first graphic novel, 120 pages, and I struggled. I hit lows, and to me, my critic group from KCU was a lifesaver, to be honest, to be able to work with them every day, a few hours. At least we were on the same time zone for a few hours, and we were able to catch up and just share our pain and just go on mute and do the work. And I believe that really allowed me to finish, and it wasn't 350 pages.
I know.
I think Leo, yeah, if you can, find a little group of people that, you're in the same time zone with, and just that, to me, that was really helpful. So, yeah, good luck. But yeah, you're not alone.
Yeah. Yeah. Should we answer Jalinda's question there as well?
Yeah.
I fully illustrated and wrote the first chapter of my graphic novel. I wasn't sure if I should format it as separate issues or together as one graphic novel. My former professors want me to pitch it to agents. As far as I know, publishers, agent. Well, Janna can answer this question better, but I think a first chapter finished is fine with a summary.
Yeah, well, what I would recommend is you could thumbnail the whole first chapter and maybe like you could make them almost in between thumbnails and pencils, like a little bit tight thumbnails or kind of loose pencils. And maybe just finish a couple of pages as final art.
Sounds like they've already finished it, the chapter.
Oh, did they already finish it?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay, you're right. Okay, sorry. The first sentence, I missed that. I fully illustrated and wrote. Yeah, well then you finished it. So then yes, it's fine. You can pitch it with a fully finished chapter for sure. It's okay. It's totally okay.
Yeah, and if for some reason the editor is like, we like this idea, we like this story, but the first chapter is all wrong, they'll tell you. But that's unlikely, I think.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, Janna. Well, it's so nice to see you all the time. So
Yes.
thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks everybody for being here. And I hope you learned something. And I guess we learned all about small wins, accountability, deadlines, and being around people who understand us, right?
Gosh, yeah, and who want to see us thrive, who want
Yeah.
to see us hit those goals, not the big goals, any goal.
Yes. Well,
Unless
we
they
can
signed a
all do it.
contract, in which case you got to hit that goal.
Yes, we can all do it together. All
Yeah.
right.
Totally. Thanks, Janna.
Thank you,
Thanks so much.
Tom.
Thanks,
And
everybody.
thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm gonna take a little screenshot of all of us hanging out here.
Yeah, and feel
Thank
free to reach
you.
out. I'm easy to find. You can ask questions about the group or
Yeah,
whatever.
go to Sequential Artist Workshop if you have questions for Tom.
Okay. Thanks, Janna.
Okay.
Bye.
Good night, everybody. Bye.
Bye.